Hi, this is Kai from Kikai Craft, and today we are going to go on an inksploration, an ink experiment, if you would like. One of the first things that I thought about when I started swatching my inks was that which tool and which paper would best show the properties of the inks, and which ones can create or recreate what the ink makers were thinking about when they created these inks, so that whenever I looked at them, I would appreciate them the same way. And as we all know, apart from the ink, the tool used to write with or to swatch with matters, and of course the paper. So for this experiment, I have 3 different surfaces that we are going to check inks on. These are some of the common, or 2 of the common papers that I've noticed people use, and they are quite popular. So the first is the Col-o-ring. So I'll be using cards from the Col-o-ring to test. I will also be using the Regalia paper, one of the newer ones that we have seen. This is from the Endless group. So I'm using the Endless notepad. Here it says it's a creative block. It's a tear-off notepad, and it has the ink-loving Regalia Regalia paper, 80 GSM acid-free. So we are going to be using this for some of our swatches. Okay, or all of them actually for this experiment. And we will be using Tomoe River paper. In particular, I'll be using the Tomoe River notebook, a 5mm grid. Okay, and that will be, or those will be our canvases. Now for the ink today, I decided to show Best Wishes from the DMN Inkvent Calendar 2022. Let me just fix our light a bit. There you go. Just to show it some appreciation, because I don't think I appreciated it enough when I went through this year's Inkvent Calendar. And for the swatching tools, I have quite a bit. First, we have the very ubiquitous cotton tips. Nope, I won't be using a fountain pen. We'll also be using a paintbrush. Okay, and of course the glass nib. Okay, I'll also be using another glass nib. This is from the Majohn or Moonman N6 set. It says it's a glass nib. I kind of feel that it's more of an acrylic shaped as a glass nib, but it is a good tool as well. I'll also be using the Kakimori Brass nib. This actually is a tool that I have been using quite frequently, but I don't know. We'll see in today's experiment if it is something that it should be used. One other tool that I'll be using is it called the Brause, or the Brause calligraphy kit, I would say. It has a nib, and I use the ornament nib. This is in the 4.0mm size. So if you guys don't know, it's the one with the circle, yeah, that kind of tip. All right, it's very interesting. I also, because of course I don't know much about these things, I also got the 2.5 and the 1.5 nibs, so we'll be looking at these as well. And of course I also got Sailor's Hocoro dip pen. Okay, it comes with the fine and the 1.0. Okay, so these will be what we will be using for today's exploration. All right, so let's get started. So the idea, of course, is to swatch or swab the colors on the different surfaces. And then we'll see which tool works with which paper and which would be the best combination. All right, so let's go ahead and just prep up. So for the Endless, what I'll do is I'll just grab a sheet. I don't want it on the block because I'm not sure how it will bleed through. What I've done is I have prepared sort of a template that I can put under. So if I want to reuse it for other explorations, I have basically the same measurements. You can actually see through it, so that's good. And of course, I have a few of the swatch cards. All right. And we will be using the nibs in this order. We'll be using the cotton and then the paintbrush, the glass nib, the other glass nib, the brass nib, the ornament, and then the Hocoro from Sailor. Okay, so I used this because this ink I feel has both shimmer and shine, and I want to see how these papers and these tools actually showcase the shimmer and the shine. Okay, let me just remove that sticker. It's a bit distracting me. I numbered all my Inkvent inks just so that I remember which day goes with which. I'm also preparing some paper to dry the tools with. All right. Okay, I think this is good. Let's start with this one. All right. So with the cotton tip, the idea is, oh, this is so nice on this paper. Feels really good. Looks very dark. Then of course we'll put it here too. Perhaps let's dip it a bit more. I want the ink to be a little thick. I want to be just a bit generous. Okay, and of course let's get the block out. Okay, with a little bit of cat hair apparently. All right, move that to the side, and let's dip it just a little bit again. All right. Okay, so this is with the cotton tip. All right, let's move forward. I can already see the different papers reacting to the ink. Let's zoom you in just a little bit. There you go. All right. Okay, now let's use, oh, I want to tumble this a bit just to give equal opportunity for all the glitter to sort of be integrated into the ink. Now this one, I have to say, is one of the messiest to use because it does drink up a lot of the ink. All right, so let's set it up. Ooh, before I forget, we want to write down what we used. All right, so this one is with the cotton tip. So cotton tip. The color is starting to show. Okay, let's just put that aside for now. Then here, of course, we want to write cotton tip 2. This pen is actually inked with a Jacques Herbin Emerald de Chivor, so it's not the same color, but that's okay. And again, cotton tip. The Regalia paper is so smooth. Ooh, it's upside down, but that's okay. All right, let's then try the paintbrush. All right. Okay, again, just a slight tumble. All right, let's put it in. Okay, it's a bit trickier to gauge. Okay, it's kind of filled. Now it got everywhere. Oh, nice. This feels so good to put on paper. So smooth. Okay, let's move that just a little bit aside so you can also see it's just beautiful. Look at that. Okay, let's leave that to the side to dry. And let's get our coloring paper. This one has a lot of texture going for it. There we go. Okay, let's rinse this. Okay. It just completely changed the color of my water jar. Just went all the way black on me. This is an interesting ink, I think. When you lay it down, it looks like a black blue, but when it starts drying up, it becomes this green color. And I think that's quite interesting. Right, really takes a lot of cleaning up. So if you're going to be swatching a lot of inks, I suggest you have a lot of these on hand so you don't have to just keep on dipping it to clean. Okay, then we want to use for swatching, okay, not for writing just yet, we want to use the Kakimori nib, but we'll also be using it to write on the side. Okay, let's just write down that this is the paintbrush. Okay, let's put that to the side. And again, you want to write here that this is the paintbrush. Okay, and finally on our endless creative block, also want to write here that it's the paintbrush. So it's easier for us to see the differences later. All right, let's go through the same motion for the Kakimori nib. Now, I have to say, my Kakimori nib, I see a lot of people having a really good experience with their Kakimori. For me, it feels very, it gives me a lot of feedback. So I don't know, do you feel that way too when you use your Kakimori nib? Like there's just a lot of feedback happening. So I don't know, is it because it's new? Okay. It's not super new though. All right, let's dip it again. And let's use a coloring. You can literally hear it. So much feedback happening. All right. Okay, and of course, let's dip that, put it on our color block. Okay, logistically, this is not very, okay, I didn't plan it well enough, but that's okay. Well, it feels very nice when you lay it onto the Regalia paper. And we'll also be using it to write. Okay, so let's start with that. Okay, let's see, make sure you guys can see it. All right, let's go for Kakimori. I have to say though that on the Tomoe, it feels very good. No feedback at all on the Tomoe River. Okay, let's go and try to write it in cursive or script. This is brass. All right, and let's try to just make a bigger swatch. Okay, it looks very good actually. I think the brass nib and the Kakimori, the Tomoe River is a really good combination. let's just go ahead and try to write bigger. All right, so it looks quite nice. Let's go ahead and rinse that. Okay, on the tissue, this thing looks like almost a tie-dye thing. Looks very nice. Okay, let's move and try to get, okay, let's cap that before I have an accident. Let's write Kakimori here. Just make sure you guys can still see what's going on. All right. This is the Kakimori Brass nib. Okay, let's go ahead and write that here too. Okay. See, the color is really changing. How interesting that when you first lay it down, it's just really black, and then it kind of changes. And I think the different tools that we use also play a big role in the color that it sort of creates. Kakimori Brass nib. Okay, so far this is how it looks. It's kind of interesting. The cotton tip is really showing the sheen. I hope the camera is getting it. Yeah, the paintbrush, it's more even, and the Kakimori, I don't know, I don't feel that it's dried enough. Okay, let's go ahead and try the Brause. Please let me know how this is pronounced. B-R-A-U-S-E. Okay, and this is the Ornament Metal Nib 4mm. Okay. All right. Let's dip that. So I'm just basically dipping it in. I feel like, obviously, well, not obviously, I feel like this has like the least reserve ink. Like I have to dip it twice because it's really drying up on the paper. All right, let's leave it like that. Not happy with the shape, but okay. Then we want it on our card. I feel that the Col-o-ring absorbs the ink really quickly. It's like a very thirsty sort of card or surface. I have to, if you see it, it's like drying up. Okay, let's leave that to the side to dry. I'll label it in a bit. And finally, ooh, okay, let's move it all to the side now. All right, here we go. Let's add this right here. Again, the Regalia paper feels so nice and smooth. It's also not like as thirsty as the Col-o-ring. You see, I had a lot of mileage. Okay, now this is the 4.0. And just because I was curious, they do have other sizes. They have 5.0, 2.5, 1.5, 1 millimeter. I'm pretty sure they have a 3 millimeter one and maybe half steps in between. The shop that I got it from just didn't have it. And because I am very curious, I am going to go ahead and, all right, try it with the 2.5. Now I'm not going to try it with the 1 because I feel like the 1 is just so tiny. I think that the 1 millimeter or 1.5, I think this is. And let me just double check. I think it is 1.5. I just feel like it's just too tiny to make swabs with. Okay. Oh, we'll see if this one looks okay. We might try it. So this is the 2.5. Oh, it's actually very, if I draw a line, it's actually very thin already, and we have to use and dip too often. So I think the 1 might be good for writing and not really for swatching inks. All right, has a nice shape though. Okay. All right, let's clean that up a bit. And we want to make sure that we label these two. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and remove the nib in preparation for the writing. They're just so tiny. I have to like remember to make sure that they are nice and safe. Okay. So this is, all right, Brause Ornament. And this is in 4 millimeter. Okay, and this one is also in Brause. Now if you notice, I didn't use this one for the others because I feel like it's too thin. Ornament, and this one is in 2.5 millimeter. Okay, so far on the Regalia paper, all of them are showing the sheen. Is this just a sheen thing? Okay. All right, I'll show them to you later when they're a bit drier. Ooh, almost forgot to write it here. This is Brause Ornament, and this is in 4.0. All right, oh, this one. Look at the color and the coloring. It's just like, you see the nice sheen right there. It's like magenta with an under color of like, what, green? Which is what I expected, but all of them are showing different, I don't know, different effects. All right, let's go ahead and go for writing samples. Okay, as we wait for everything to dry. Okay, let's, before we forget, for this one, this is the, again, the Brause Ornament 4 millimeter. Okay, now let's go for writing. So we already have our Kakimori. All right, let's put all of these aside. Then we want to go and use our glass nib on the Tomoe. Oh, I forgot to try it here. I try it. Okay, I'm just gonna do the Kakimori there too. Let's try it here first though. This one is the Vetro VI glass nib. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Let's start here then. The Vetro VI. And this is the, oh, it's laying it nice and thick. Glass nib. Let's go ahead and use that. Okay, let's try to make it just a bit bigger. And maybe I can write just a little bit slower. Okay, in the hopes that I write better. Actually, I write a little shakier if I do that. Wow, it's like my glass nib is behaving really well today. All right, let's go ahead and write on our Regalia paper too. Okay, let's leave a little space for the Kakimori Brass nib, and let's go ahead and write. It's a little scratchy when I write on the Regalia. Like it catches, you see? Okay, I have to find ink again. All right, and let's just put a, I don't know, it doesn't feel so nice when I write on the Regalia paper. It's like, you know the feeling when you have that weird piece of chalk on the, what do you call that, on the blackboard? That's kind of how it feels when I'm writing on the Regalia with this glass nib. Okay. It's an errant tissue for my drying bit. Okay, let's, before I forget, let me write with the Kakimori here. How I'm gonna do that. Okay, well, I must just be courageous and try to write over that, and if it's just a little bit wet. All right, oof, there's a huge drop there. All right, let's go for the, okay, this is the Kakimori. Okay, just so you know, I am not touching this, but it's super feathering right now. So it's not me smudging it. Brass nib. It's, I don't know. It's like very much feathering in the Regalia. Okay. Let's move on to the next writing instrument I have, and that would be, okay, I'm starting to super like this, sorry, the Kakimori rosewood holder. It's starting to show a few stains from my previous use with previous inks. Okay, let's try this glass nib slash what I really think is an acrylic plastic. All right. This is the Moonman or the Majohn N6. It feels smoother than the glass nib from Vetro VI or Majohn N6, but it's still sort of catching on the paper. Ooh, this does not feel so good when you write or when you scribble like that. All right, let's put that aside to dry, and let's put this brush to write on. Okay, 1, 2, 3. This is the Moonman. Okay, very good. Misspelled Moonman, but fine. Or the Majohn N6. And let's just shade it in like that. And here's a slightly longer shading. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4, and 5. I don't know, are you like that too? You just want to make sure you're as uniform as possible. Okay, and of course we want to write here. Hopefully I spell it better. Moonman N6. And let's write it bigger using Majohn. Majohn N6. That was like a much better writing experience on the Tomoe River paper. Oh, just want to show you. Look at the Regalia with the Kakimori. That really like spread quite a bit. You can see it starting with the Moonman as well. All right, that's interesting. That means what? That the creative block doesn't work well when you use it to write with. That's a bummer. Okay, and now we want to use the Hocoro nib. Okay, am I going to use this now? Or maybe I want to try the Brause one first. Okay, I'm going to use the Brause one in 1.5 nib. Okay. That's the Brause Ornament 1.5. Okay. Let's make sure it has some of the shimmer. I think it's shimmer because it goes to the very bottom. Okay, so let's just try it. Okay, and here let's go ahead and write, okay, that this is 1, 2, 3 Brause. I have to say though, it feels so nice to write with this. Oops. Nice. Okay, then we will try and write in cursive or script. Ornament. Let's, oh, look at that. Okay, shade 2, 3, 4, 5. That's kind of nice though. Okay, and again, let's go ahead and dip it. And let's write again. Okay, and I have to write here. That is the 1.5. Okay, penmanship could be better, but this, so nice to write with. Very smooth. Ooh, before I forget, I just want to tumble it a bit before I write on our endless creative block. Okay, I'm not very happy with how it worked with the Kakimori. Actually, you can also see it here in the letter G, so I suppose when it kind of pulls together, it doesn't deal well with that. Okay. Ooh, I don't know how it's going to work with this. It's such an, like a very thick line. Oops. 1.5. And let's just do our little squigglies. Oh, this is so nice to write with. Like really. There we go. All right, we'll see how that reacts with the paper. Ooh, that's very interesting. I was just looking at this and I just want to share with you something that I noticed. Out of all the writing samples using this very same ink, it's only the Brause Ornament that you actually see the green. The others are just so heavy on the like a purple sort of sheen. Okay, let's go for the last one. Now we're going to use the Sailor Hocoro. All right, I'm just gonna use the fine tip first, and then I will use the 1.0 millimeter. I suppose you call that a stub. Okay, so that's right. Okay, this is very fine. Hocoro, and this is in fine. And if I scribble, it's so tiny that it's not really meant for swatching or anything like that. I suppose it'll dry really nice and quick. Let's try it on this. Okay. All right, 1, 2, 3. Again, the Sailor Hocoro, and this is again in fine. Not really very good with swatching the very ink itself. It's just a bit too fine. On the other hand, it's also very green, at least when you lay it the first time. Okay, let's go and try the stub nib for this. So it's very easy to remove. You literally just pull it off, and then you want to get the other nib for it. Oh, don't escape. Okay, and there's like this guide, helps you. Okay, and you have to wait for the click. Of course, I want to make sure that it has the same chance at getting the shimmer and the shine. Shimmer and sheen, I mean. I was a little distracted by the shimmer that I now see on the Col-o-ring. Okay, let's go ahead, and this is the Sailor Hocoro, and this is in the 1.0 millimeter. Let's just go ahead. So this way it's quite fine. If I use it this way, obviously it's going to be much thicker. All right, let's go ahead and try it here. Okay, well, the paper behaved well with the Brause. That's good. Okay, let's go ahead and Sailor Hocoro. It feels really nice to write with this one here. Okay. All right, that was kind of good. Okay. So, it's not entirely dry yet, but I suppose we can have a look at the coloring at least. Okay, let's put that aside. Again, the ink that we used for this is the Diamond or Diamond Best Wishes, or Diamine. Okay, let's look at the coloring first. Okay. So, for the cotton, sorry to confuse you, there we go. All right, for the cotton tip, this is how it looks. Let's put these aside so you don't get visually. Okay, let's just move that. All right. So that's for the cotton tip. And then this is from the paintbrush. Okay. Make sure that you see it. Okay, and this is from the Kakimori Brass nib. You do see a little bit. Yep. And then finally from the Brause Ornament 4mm. All right, with the coloring, what I can see from my end, I don't know if the camera and the light is being kind to us today, but for cotton tip, it's much smoother, and I can see some of the red sheen and the dark green, but the green is very dark. For the paintbrush, I don't see so much of the sheen, but I can see a lot of it. I mean, the sheen is just so evenly spread out that you can't really see it like highlighted, but I also see the green. This is actually the greenest of all, the one from the paintbrush. For the Kakimori, it has some sort of like a 3D feel to it. Like you can see the broad strokes. Okay. Then of course you see a lot of the sheen too. But from the Brause, you see the sheen and the shimmer. So see there's some sheen there, and then the shimmer right there, and then the green. So if we're talking coloring, at least for this particular ink, I think this was the best combination. So the coloring with the Brause Ornament 4mm, really nice. All right, let's put that aside. Okay, now let's go to the Endless from the Creative Block. Okay, from the cotton tip again, very even. The paintbrush, much more even, and the sheen is like, it's so well spread out. It's just blending into the color. The Kakimori Brass nib has an interesting effect. You see the sheen, then you see some, I don't know if the camera is catching it. I hope it is. It has some sort of like a purple undertone right there. I don't know, in the camera it kind of looks like green. Let me try and see if I turn off this light. Okay. All right, I don't know. Does it help? Okay, it kind of shows more. All right, maybe if you just adjust that a bit. Okay, and for the Brause Ornament, it shows some purple right there. There you go. And then the sheen in some burgundy color, and then you see the green under. And for the 2.5, you see more of the different colors that are in it. The purple, the sheen, and the green. For the writing though, I don't know. For Kakimori, right there, and right there for the Vetro VI glass, it sort of feathered quite a bit. But it was more well behaved, even with the Brause, with the thick lines, it was quite well behaved there. And with the others as well. With the Moonman, it has some feathering, I can see it. But it was okay. It wasn't very happy with the first two. In terms of like shading, it seemed okay. On any which one, best one I suppose would be the Moonman. Looks very nice there. Okay. All right, and finally on the Tomoe. All right, for the cotton tip, I like it because it doesn't really show the green actually. It has like the purples and the red. Not much of the sheen. I mean, not much of the green. Paintbrush, again, quite evenly spread. Okay, tiny bit of green right there, but I see purples and a sort of burgundy red sheen going for it. Okay. Kakimori. It's okay. I mean, I don't see much of the green. Okay. All right. And for the Brause though, there's like a lot of things going on. It has the purple, it has the green, it has some of the silver shimmer going on, and here there's like this burgundy sort of sheen, and then there's like a mix. This one is very interesting how it's reacting with that. In terms of writing though, this paper with all of the writing tools, it worked really well. Even with the Kakimori right here, when there's like some thickness there, it handled it well. Okay, Vetro, it was quite thick when I laid it down. Again, it handled it quite well. Don't see feathering. Yep. And with the rest, even with this, it was so good. Very interesting. For Brause, it just came out with so many different effects. Here it is the greenest of the bunch. Apart from this Sailor Hocoro. Let's check for bleeding. There is none. Well, some ghosting, tiny bit of almost bleeding. See the green there, and here as well. Okay, for the endless, I forgot to check. So this is the creative block. A lot of bleeding happening there. Okay, so I suppose this one, you just use one side of it really. Okay, all right, so all in all, how do I feel about this? Well, what I'm going to do is I am going to try and use this same experiment, but this time I'm going to go ahead and try to use inks that have just sheen or just shimmer and also some shading. I want to see how it works. But right now, in terms of variety in results, Brause is such a winner. Okay. Kakimori, after using it with these, at least for my nib, I wish that it showed more of the properties. The paintbrush is lovely to use, but it's just so even, right, that it barely really highlights any of the properties. It's just like an even color. And the cotton tip is, I think, my second favorite because it does showcase some of the features. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to go and try this experiment using other inks, and I'll be sharing those with you too. Give me a second. experiment. Took a bit of time. But again, the objective is to sort of figure out which tool and which paper might be really good for your swatch book or your swatch samples. Now, of course, different people have different experiences and different objectives and different ways of appreciating swatches. So I just wanted to sort of show everyone what the different papers can achieve. Okay, so what I did again was in this exercise to work with different inks. I used Vinta's Lakbay 1861, or it's Sea and Sky. This is supposed to have some shimmer. I used Diamond or Diamine's Best Wishes. This is supposed to be a chameleon ink. It's from their Ink Vent calendar. All right, excuse the cat hair. And I use a shading ink, the Sailor Manyo ink Fuji. It's a dual shading ink. And I used the cotton tip, the paintbrush. I went through that already. And the glass nib, also a brass nib, and the Brause Ornament for this whole exercise. Okay, so let's look at the Tomoe River paper. This is using the Tomoe River paper notebook. It doesn't exactly say, oh yes, 6 to 8 grams per square meter, so it's 6 to 8 GSM. And this is, let's just move these to the side so you can better appreciate it. Okay, so this is how it looks. All right, using the shimmer ink from Vinta, cotton tip, paintbrush, Kakimori, and the Brause Ornament metal. These are the writing samples for each. I used a glass nib and the Moonman N6. Actually, this is the Sailor Hocoro. Sailor Hocoro again, and the Kakimori Brass nib. And in terms of this particular ink, I think the cotton tip did really well. You can see the shimmer on it. I don't know, the shimmer kind of looks like a sheen actually. And in terms of writing samples, I really liked how the glass nib worked with this particular ink on the Tomoe. All right. For the Diamond Best Wishes, which is supposed to be a chameleon ink, you can see here the cotton tip, the paintbrush, Kakimori, and brass nib. In terms of how they worked with this paper, I really liked how the cotton tip interacted with the ink and the paper in terms of its like evenness and its ability to sort of highlight its different features. And I really like how the Brause Ornament 4mm just made it look a bit grungy and a bit yeah, it just created a very interesting sort of collage of effects on it. It's, I don't know if the camera is doing it justice, but it's very interesting how the Brause Ornament and the paper and the ink interacted. And in terms of writing samples, we have your Kakimori, the glass nib, Moonman, the Brause, and the Sailor Hocoro. For writing, I think I really like the glass nib for this one, in terms of like showing off the different properties. But the Moonman, it was really, the ink was so well behaved with the Moonman. It's very nice. So again, the glass nib was quite good. Okay, in both. Moonman here was just a little, it was behaved, but I don't know, could be the color. It was a bit too light. Okay, and finally, when I use the Manyo Fuji, it's a dual shading ink. There you see it cut with the cotton tip, the paintbrush, the Kakimori Brass nib, and the Brause Ornament. Again, the Brause Ornament 4mm created a very interesting pattern out of all these before, I think the cotton tip again showed quite a bit of the properties, followed by the paintbrush. It was so well behaved with the brass nib. It's just very even. And again, very funky with the Brause Ornament. In terms of writing, again, you would see that the ink behaved well with the Majohn N6. I have to say the Majohn N6, which is, oops, this pen, really worked well with the writing samples. All the writing samples from the Majohn, it really tamed the ink quite a bit. So that was really good for writing samples. And for the glass nib, although it is pretty, it is also very thick. And I suppose it would depend on the ink, just how nice it is, because here there's a lot of feathering happening. For the Kakimori, it was okay, but there was a bit of pooling at some instances. And so it was pretty inconsistent, at least with me, right? And how I use it. It's still pretty, but yeah, it was a little inconsistent in its performance. So if I were going to use the Tomoe River notebook, I definitely use the Brause Ornament 4mm for it, because of how interesting the patterns were when I used the Brause Ornament. Here, not so though. Could have been the way I used it. And in terms of like the paper itself and bleeding, it only bled with the Brause Ornament, and it's not even much. Okay, but I mean, if you're going to use one ink for every sheet and nothing in the back, I think this particular notebook is quite good for your ink experiment. So this is the Tomoe River notebook, 68 GSM. It's a soft cover, so it's very nice to flip through it. I think I'm gonna keep that for that, but yeah, so I'll most probably use the Brause Ornament and maybe the cotton tip when I do swatches with this. The Kakimori Brass nib, I really want to like it, but it didn't really do so well with the Tomoe River. All right, so that's that for the notebook. Then let's look at how the inks and the tools behave with the Endless Creative block. Okay, it's one of their, I don't know, I think newer offerings. Okay, so with the Vinta, it had a lot of feathering with the glass nib, and the Moonman too. Okay, it was better behaved with the Hocoro, but the Hocoro is like a much thinner. This is the, oh sorry, Sailor Hocoro. Okay, it's very cute, but I don't know, it's, for my style, it's a bit too thin. Perhaps if you like the very thin sort of writing, this could be good for you. It's very nice though, if it's like super thin, if you're into that, that's very nice. Of course, there's no swatchings with that. This is how it bled through. So there's a lot of bleeding through for this sample and with the Endless Creative block. This is how it behaved with the inks and the tools for the Diamond's Best Wishes. Okay, again, Brause Ornament, very funky Brause Ornament again. I really like it. It just comes up with very interesting things. The Kakimori Brass nib was okay, it was well behaved. The paintbrush for this, it's quite, the shimmer, the sheen was very spread out. It's like evenly spread out. The cotton tip was quite good for this. Okay. In terms of writing, Brause Ornament was fantastic. So even if it feathered with the Kakimori Brass nib with a thicker Brause Ornament 1.5, it didn't do any of that. So that was nice. Did it bleed through? Let's have a look. yes, definitely it bled through. Not as badly as this, but still quite a bit. And then with the Majohn ink, cotton tip, it was a bit too like even for me. Paintbrush yielded more interesting results. The Kakimori Brass nib, it was quite well behaved with that. And the Brause Ornament, again, quite interesting. It had some of the lighter bit, the darker bit, it just did it all on its own. Again, with this paper, the Kakimori Brass nib had a lot of feathering. Okay. The Vetro glass nib was okay. Majohn had a bit of feathering as well. This was a bit too light for fine. And here where I had a little bit of a drop incident, very interesting greens all around. Okay, and did it bleed through? Definitely. It's a lot of bleed through. It went even onto my template. So if you're going to use the creative block, be very mindful. Although it can still show a lot of the ink swatch, ink properties as ink swatches. Know that there will be bleed throughs, and that maybe for writing it won't be so good. For Brause Ornament though, it was well behaved. Okay. All right, and then we have finally the coloring samples. So these cards are from the Col-o-ring. All right, so let's just have a look. This is how the Vinta looks with the cotton tip. This is the paintbrush. This would be the Brause Ornament. Okay, let's move these aside. And finally, the Kakimori. All right. And then with the Diamond Best Wishes, the chameleon ink, this is how it looks with cotton tip. This for paintbrush. This for the Kakimori Brass nib. Oops. Okay, and this for the Brause Ornament. And then with the dual shading ink from Sailor Majohn collection, this is how it looks with the cotton tip. With the paintbrush, it's much lighter, more even. Paintbrush really creates a very even sample. The Kakimori Brass nib. Here, I like how the Kakimori Brass nib performed with the ink and the paper, and then the Brause Ornament. Okay, so if I were going to use the Col-o-ring as my swatch book, I think the best or the better options would be to use the Brause Ornament or the Kakimori Brass nib, and then of course the cotton tip. But I have to say with these two, the inks were like very evenly distributed with its sheen and all that, and it almost looks homogeneous. Here there were more creative patterns that were created with this card, okay, with the Brause Ornament and the Kakimori Brass nib. Okay, so having had a look through all of these papers and all these tools, aside from my Traveler's Notebook swatch book, which I will still keep because I like having that with me, I think it would be quite good for me to just continue using my Col-o-ring for my experiments. It didn't really like shine in any of those areas like, oh, I must definitely use that all the time. And I will definitely not use the endless paper if I were just swatching, because it just really bleeds through and is very inconsistent if I were to try a writing sample, except maybe if I want to use the Brause Ornament, I think that would be very nice with this paper. Yeah, so yeah, maybe this is again more for experiments and maybe a few calligraphy practices with the Brause Ornament. And I think, oops, living with cats. Okay, and then I think this would be good with the Brause Ornament, and perhaps, yes, perhaps the Kakimori Brass nib for swatching, but I think more on Brause Ornament and cut and tip if I really want to play with the ink. They create such interesting patterns. The paintbrush was a bit inconsistent in that area, and so is the Kakimori. I can't see a lot of the properties, except maybe for this chameleon ink. See, it's quite bland. So if I were going to do a project using this Tomoe River notebook, and I do plan to do that, I think I'll be using my cut and tips for this and the Brause Ornament metal. Okay, so that's about it. Of course, it always depends on what you have in mind for your own projects. Your choices would always hinge on that. Again, these are the different papers that I used, and these are the different tools, quite a number of tools that I used. Oh yes, I just have to say, for my own projects, perhaps the Sailor Hocoro isn't just the pen for me. But I'll definitely be using the Brause Ornament nib. This is such an interesting tool to use with inks, and the Majohn. Okay, and maybe the glass nib from time to time. The brass nib from Kakimori is interesting. Maybe I just need to work with it just a bit more for me to really understand how to best use it. All right, so thank you for exploring these inks and these tools with me, and I hope that I shared something that might have helped you a bit. This is Kai from Kikai Crafts. If you learned something new and really enjoyed experimenting with me, please give this video a like. If you'd like to see more videos like this, more ink explorations, more pen explorations, please do subscribe. And if you want to say hi, maybe share tips on how to best use this. I want to say I want to say hi to Muse Pens. They gave me a lot of tips on how to use the Kakimori Brass nibs. Thank you very much, Muse Pens. Yep, if you have tips on how to use these so that they can really shine, please leave me a comment below so I can try that too. All right, this is Kai from Kikai Craft. Have a good day or a restful evening. Bye.